Probably one of the online communities I've been the most active at was the iOS gaming community. Do you remember those early days of the App Store? Because I certainly do, and I want to talk about them today. Nowadays, probably because the novelty of playing games on my phone has since kind of died down, I don't play a lot of games on my smartphone anymore. I still have a games folder here, as you can see. I don't go there too often anymore. I guess Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, all these things have kind of taken their place. But there was a time when I saw this thing as basically a new generation Game Boy. Let me explain. So smartphones around the, let's say 2008, 2009 is when pretty much everybody around you started getting smartphones. I was big into Palm Pilots way back in the day, but the trail line of Palm Pilots, which is basically a Palm Pilot with a cell phone, the grandfather of the smartphone, it wasn't for everybody. They were kind of weird to use. Like, I would see doctors and engineers and lawyers using these things, but they weren't for everybody. And with the iPhone, smartphones became a thing for everyone, really. But smartphones still couldn't do that much back when the iPhone first came out. It wasn't until the App Store that these things really became capable of doing a lot. You know, it's funny when I think about it this way. When I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when I was a kid, the Hitchhiker's Guide seemed almost cartoonishly like impossible. Like this device that has all of this information and you can use for all these different things. When I was a kid, I thought that that was like almost Inspector Gadgety. Like it's too futuristic. Like this couldn't exist. It's impossible. Today, in our pockets, we all carry something that makes the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy seem outdated. This thing does so much more than that could do. So with the App Store, a lot of developers started putting out new apps and games for this thing. In the early days of really anything, it's not really the cream of the crop that's going to be offered to us. So there was quite a bit of crap in those first days of the App Store, but there were a few gems as well, and I bought a lot of them, a lot of these games, because again, it was like having a Game Boy. It was like I have this thing in my pocket that also at the press of a button, I can play a game on it. So they got me hooked. You know me, I love portability and I love portable games. So obviously, I was right then and there, day one. Now, this is not going to be a comprehensive list of all of the classic games on those first early years, because that would be impossible. There's so many of them. There are a few notable exceptions because I plan to do a more in-depth video about them. Like, for instance, the Gameloft ripoffs. Like, if you remember, Gameloft was a developer that would put out games on the iPhone that would very, very closely mirror some better known games. You know what I'm talking about, right? So for like Halo, they would put out Nova. For Burnout, they would make Asphalt on the iPhone, and so on. So they made a lot of games, and the quality of those varies a lot. So I wanna be able to do a deeper dive on that on its own video. So I'm gonna be omitting Gameloft games from this video. So again, no order of importance. There's no chronology here. I'm just gonna be mentioning some that really come to mind when I think of those early days of the App Store. And I think the main one, the one that was, I mean, it's probably forgotten by now, but one that always makes me go like, yeah, I remember that, was Trism. Now, Match 3 games were, I guess, made for touchscreen devices, and it's no surprise that a lot of the games that were at the top charts of the App Store back then were Match 3 games. So much so that in the community, whenever like a new Match 3 game would come out, we'd go, okay, it's a new Match 3 game, what's there more to say about it? We all played Bejeweled. I used to play it back in my Palm Pilot days, and you know how a Match 3 game works. You move tiles around to match 3 colors, and then those explode and they disappear, and then the column will slide down and take its place, and then you just keep doing that. Trism had a twist though. Taking advantage of the accelerometer on your iPhone, you would turn the phone around as you played to influence where the rows would fall next. So if you want them to go this way, you turn your phone sideways. If you want to go the other way, you turn the phone the other way. So it was basically the Match 3 we already knew, with an interesting gimmick that was only capable due to this new hardware. You couldn't exactly do that on the computer playing Bejeweled. Trism was also very well known for its rags to riches story. Its developer famously became a pretty wealthy man off of the App Store. It was one of the very first success stories coming right out of the App Store. So it had that going for it. On the other side of things, we had games that were coming out for other systems, in this case for PC, that were receiving iOS ports. And being that it was the App Store was so new and we were all so naive, and we didn't have that many review sites and things like that. Social media wasn't booming like it is today, so we didn't have that much information. It really harkens back to, remember when we went to the store, a video game store, to pick up a game, and you had to kind of go on what the cover looked like and what the back of the box, kind of like the selling points that you would find there. You didn't have much more information than just that. You didn't make the best decisions. I picked up Splinter Cell on the GBA going off of the box, and I ended up hating the game, so I probably should have done a little bit more reading about what the game was like. So there was a lot of that going on in the early days of the App Store as well. One game that comes to mind was Spore. Will Wright, the creator of SimCity and some many other classics, he had this game coming out called Spore, which obviously you know by now, and it was a very, very ambitious title. And I'm a fan of strategy games. I was a fan of SimCity, so I was very hyped for Spore. And when I found out that Spore was going to come out on the iPhone, I was even more hyped because, as you know, I love portability. So if I can play Spore on my phone, I'd much rather do that than play it on the computer, even though I did buy it for the computer. And my dreams came crashing down the moment I loaded up the game. First of all, back then, the pricing scheme on the App Store was all out of whack. Like, it became a race to the bottom, to the 99-cent price point relatively recently, if you think about it, because in those early days, those games were pretty expensive, regardless of whether they were good or bad. So Spore, for instance, was actually $9.99, $10 for a phone game. There was a lot of that going on back then. Like, if the game is from a well-established franchise, it would be much more expensive than what we're used to paying now for cell phone games. But anyway, it's portable Spore. I can't miss out on this. I bought it, and it was crap. It was perhaps, oh my god. So basically they boiled down Spore to just that amoeba stage where you're just controlling this little bacteria and fighting others. That's all it was for $10. And then I gotta give him credit. You could take a picture of yourself with the camera on the phone and apply your picture as a texture on the little amoeba in the game. $10. I paid for that. Jesus Christ. Now, not every PC game being ported for iOS felt like a ripoff. We had games that were actually my preferred way of playing them, like what I hoped Spore would be, but wasn't. Some games actually nailed that, like Plants vs. Zombies. The game was developed by PopCap originally for PC and Mac, and I always heard great things about it, but again, I'm a portable guy. PC games don't have that pull on me. If you say that I can play that on a thing that goes in my pocket, then I'm in. I bought Plants vs. Zombies on my iPhone, and I ended up buying it again when it came out on the iPad. I beat this game some 4 or 5 times. It became one of my favorite. In fact, it was kind of my introduction to tower defense now that I think about it, and it's a genre that I still enjoy to this day because of the iPhone version. I've since picked up the DS version, which isn't as good. The graphics are, they took a real, you're talking, people aren't mad right now because of the downgrade from the Spider-Man game. This is a whole thing going on the internet right now. The downgrade between the iOS port of Plants vs. Zombies to the DS port of Plants vs. Zombies. Holy crap, son. Like, I still picked it up because I love the DS, but if you're coming from the iOS version of Plants vs. Zombies to the DS version, holy crap. Now, there were a lot of games that were kind of tailored for this hardware, right, on a smartphone. So you had games like Trism, which used the touchscreen and the gyroscope. You had games like Plants vs. Zombies, which doesn't work as well with a controller, or I would even say like, I prefer it on a touchscreen than even a mouse. But there are some games that were not suited for touchscreens at all and still made their way to the App Store, like Sonic. Sonic was, to my recollection, one of the first attempts to bring a more conventional game to a mobile platform like the iPhone. And I'll say this, it worked well enough. I mean, obviously levels that required some more precision in your jumping and the timing and everything like that, yeah, that's not probably the best platform to play it at. But Sonic is still a pretty simple game, especially when it comes to the control scheme. You don't have more complicated moves. So it worked well enough even on the touchscreen. There were a lot of naysayers back in the day. I had a lot of fun with it. And then on other conventional games that probably shouldn't have worked that well on touchscreens, but actually were not that bad, was one of my all-time DOS favorites, Abuse, or rather, as it came out on the App Store, Alien Abuse. Abuse is a cult classic DOS game that kind of pioneered the keyboard and mouse control scheme. In it, you play this little guy who's running away from this space prison where they're conducting all these weird genetic experiments on the inmates and turn them into alien-like xenomorphs. So, as a fan of aliens, right? obviously I was hooked into this game right from when I was a kid, and the ability to play portably again was a big selling point for me. Now, it's funny because there was a lot of drama surrounding Alien Abuse, that port of the game that came out on iOS, and I was only kind of aware of what happened. It wasn't until I sat down to make some notes for this video that I became fully aware of what actually happened back then, why the game was pulled down from the App Store, all the controversy about copyright. Basically, this is what happened. Abuse was released in 1996 by Crack.com, a company founded by Dave Taylor, a former ID software programmer. The company would unfortunately go bankrupt shortly after, but before that, Taylor released the source code of Abuse as open source, so you could take the code and create your own levels, things like that. Now, this is important to point out. The game is not being made freeware, and it's not being made public domain. Just open source. Kind of like how Doom is open source. You can port Doom, you can create, like you can mess around with Doom, but you can't sell Doom without their authorization. It's open source. It's not free for you to use however you want. This apparently was lost on Eurocenter, a company better known for Grail Online, which was, at its inception, a ripoff of Zelda: Link to the Past with online multiplayer. Stefan Porta, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, released a port of Abuse in 2009 called Alien Abuse. This is the one I ended up buying. And I loved the game. I felt the controls worked surprisingly well. And in fact, one of my first video reviews on YouTube on my main channel was on Alien Abuse. And it's pretty amateuristic, as you would imagine.
Hey guys, izzynobre here again with another iPhone game review. This time we'll be reviewing Alien Abuse. Let's see if the camera will cooperate with me today. Come on, focus. God damn it. Controls are pretty interesting. I think the developers moved in the right direction when it comes to controlling, you know, for controls for a shooter game on the iPhone, because obviously there's no buttons, but they actually did a pretty good job.
There was soon some controversy on iOS forums about Alien Abuse and the copyright status of the game. So apparently, and as this is, we'd only find this out much later, Stefan actually tried to contact Taylor during the Game Developers Conference of 2009 to explain what he was doing. He's going to take the open source, I'm going to port it over to iOS. Is everything cool? Taylor, on the other hand, by his own admission, was a little busy with what was going on with the event, which is very understandable. Stefan took Taylor's silence to mean blessing and released the game. Now, here's the problem. They made the game open source, not public domain, and not only that, but the sound assets that he used in his port were never part of the open source. Neither were the commercial levels included in the port. So basically the guy said, open source, that's good enough, right? Screw it, I'm gonna put it out, I'm gonna sell it. Taylor ended up contacting the App Store. They pulled Alien Abuse down. They released their own version called Abuse Classic by Exact Entertainment. These guys that made the Streets of LA port for the GameCube and Call of Duty 3 for the Wii. Then, in something that we don't see every day, there was some back and forth between the two on online forums that covered iOS gaming news, with Stefan saying, trying to play intellectual property lawyer, saying, well, actually, open source means this and that, and Dave Taylor saying, we had a lawyer when we spoke, and he told you that that was not how you do these things. But Stefan is one of those guys, apparently, that thinks he knows better than lawyers. It's funny because I came across, in doing this research, I came across my own posts on the thread where they were duking it out, and to my shock, in reading this some 10 years later, I actually sided with Eurocenter on the matter, because obviously I hadn't read Taylor's explanation of everything that went down, and I was almost 10 years younger, and I guess dumber, but I was kind of embarrassed to read that post and be like, oh, actually, I guess I was dumb. This is just the tip of the iceberg, of course. There's a lot of games that I didn't mention here, but these are some of the games that stick out the most when I think of the early days of playing games on my cell phone. Something that doesn't, I don't do it that much anymore. Do you still play games on your cell phone? Let me know. What are you playing on your cell phone right now? I want to know. I didn't mention any of the big blockbusters, the Angry Birds, the Doodle Jumps. This is for another video, okay? This is just some of like my deep cuts, my top picks. Let me know, like I said, what you've been playing in the comments. And as always, I want to know where you're from. I'm always very curious to know where you guys are from. I get a lot of viewers from America, a lot from Australia, but some from countries that I never expected would find me, and I find that fascinating. So let me know where you're from down in the comments. I'm always curious to know. And that's all the time I have for today. I'm Izzy, and I'm done.